Hola a todos! So, who is the best tank? It's Heathcliff Rodion, okay. But who has the best defensive skill? And how tanky can IDs be? Those are the questions I'm gonna try to give an answer to with this video. But first, what is a tank? And how useful is it? Well, it depends on content. For speedruns, like railway banners, they are usually less optimal, but for other content, they can be really useful. Let's take a practical example. Here is the Bull from Almira Dungeon 2 from the hit game Limbus Company. The Bull hurts, like a truck, and if your damage dealers get hit, they become less alive. Here is where your friend, the tank, comes in. The tank can do something very useful: tanking. And there is a simple rule: if your tank can tank the truck, then your DPS can hurt the truck like a truck. And that is nice. Also, it may allow DPS IDs to be able to do damage without having to worry about clashes, good for skills that deal good damage with lower numbers, or just status application like burn. So this time, I complexified things a bit. Because how do we judge how tanky can IDs be? First, defensive skills are pretty boring at the moment, as a lot of them are really generic and few have actually interesting effects. So I could just compare their values and voila! But that wouldn't make good tanks justice, as a lot of them have good passive effects. So I did the passives from the defensive skills themselves and other skills if they are concerned. See Rodion for more details. And then I decided to put them to the test, in real conditions this time. So I took 3 hard hitting skills to see how well IDs can tank them with their defensive skills. First, So That No One Will Cry from, So That No One Will Cry. To put it in real and not busted conditions, it is considered with 12 talisman zone, so 12 base power with 5 plus 1 coins, so a total of 75 damage. Don't worry, that's still a track. Next I took I'm sorry for this in advance. Pranya Paramita from My From Empties. This is a neutral version, so 18 plus 8, but considered with 50 karma, making it plus 150% or 2.5 times, making it 65 damage. And finally, Wayward Passenger's Counter. And Wayward Passenger's Counter. And Wayward Passenger's... What do you mean I can block a counter? Okay, so Rip Space instead, with 10 plus charge, making it a 15 base plus 2 plus 3 coin with a plus 100% bonus damage for 78 damage. Where is the ball? I don't know. And to be fair, a lot of skills become as strong and scary as is with 200 buffs. So I made calculations for the damage each ID would take from each of those skills under optimal conditions with the defensive skills. Those include any passive from the ID, type affinity, which is why I chose one of each, defense levels, and stagger thresholds. However, I didn't take Sin Affinities into account because there is no tank egos. Why do I about music? So, about egos. Sin Affinities are entirely defined by egos, making the actual resistances a combo, but egos don't tank by themselves. Sure, some have passives, and they are useful in real situations. However, passives and resistances only change after you use them, and you now only keep one ego resistances. I realize now that the old system could have been very broken. But the biggest reason for why I decided to not include them is there are gonna be more, so optimal resistances for each ID will change with them. They buff the IDs, but don't change them. Things that will change with time though are max HP and stagger thresholds with level ups. I'll still make a few notes on relevant egos in each scenario details. However, a fun fact and prediction about egos resistances. All Zayin egos have 2 times weaknesses and 1.75 resistance. If you addition all affinities, it equals 8.75. Test egos have the same, but their 1 resistances is 0.5 instead of 0.75 for a total of 8.5, with only one exception being Red Eyes Ryoshu. I'm sure it's an oversight, please PM fix it and give us worth 300 Lunartique, thank you. And He, you may guess, have 1 more resistance at 0.75, making it 8.25. So my prediction for Vav is either their second resistance going to 0.5, making the total 8, or they can take it a step forward, for example making one of their weakness at 1.5 for 7.75 total. I guess we'll be able to check it out soon enough with next season, and LS should be another step further, maybe even bigger. In any case, back to IDs, and for the last couple of rules, they are considered at max level and up by 4. Conditions for passives under 50% HP are considered filled at max HP for testing. Spoiler, this doesn't actually matter. Also, healing passives are not taken into account as they heal after the damage is done, they don't reduce the damage. But I still made a few notes about them. Anyway, let's get to it. So first, I took back the tier list format for fast checking, and did one for both 0 damage, with only defense skills, and another with all other elements taken into account. So let's start with so that no one will cry damage. You might notice that those should be read backwards, as you want to take less damage. I still put the higher numbers on top because big numbers. The main goal of the raw damage tier list is to make some points. The first one being the evade skill potential, for they are the ones able to completely negate possible hundreds of damage, which you can see with Sang Ryoshu and Sinclair Hong Lu, whose values goes above the 17 roll of the skill. The second point is the potency of other factors. Slashing Ishmael, with natural affinity to blunt, still manages to take only 18 damage out of 75 because of the 20 shield of passive, the 20 of block, and the 40 defense levels. Hardcore Meursault, without passive but with resistance and defense level, takes only 1 damage. Some with everything even keep some shields after the attack. However, it also works the other way, as it can just kill some IDs from full health. We will make individual details later, so let's check the second list for Prajna damage. Here, I want to highlight how the evade skills are, instead, effectively useless. The blocks don't have reasons to change. The funny thing on the right here is, the lowest possible damage is higher, and that's because Prajna has a 40 offense level, while the previous one only had 33. This does highlight how defense level matter, as Heathcliff Rodion, who had the same conditions than Hardcore Meursault, still takes 12 damage. The difference in offense level is even more noticeable because of the 2.5 multiplier. So that's a good case to notice Gregor higher defense level, making him third without pierce resistance. As for why the maximum damage does not really increase, is because type affinities are still 2 times, so the offense-defense difference isn't as noticeable. Finally, Rip Space tier list. The left one has one funny thing, again demonstrating the power evade, with Ting Tang able to avoid the first hit, nullifying more damage than blocks. And it does translate somewhat into receiving low damage overall because of it, and the slash resistance. Also, passive can really influence a lot, as the Heathcliff Rodion high shields allows her to tank a lot without resistance. Before going into the details, I've got one final tier list based on an arbitrary value that I'll call the tank ratio. This is the percentage of damage IDs are expected to receive from a 50 damage skill of offense level 35 with defense levels, defensive skills, and passives. This does provide me with a better appreciation on ID's defensive capacities without affinities or thresholds. It's obviously also not perfect, as evades are not taken into account. But let's elaborate about it more in the details, shall we? As there are more infos on these ones, here is a chart for reading. Red value means 2 times weakness, and grey 2 times resistance. B is for block, E for evade, and C for counter. A P means the ID has a full passive, H access to heal with its value, S that the unit is staggered, maybe plus or plus plus, and D is for dead. So now let us go again. Yi Sang is a fragile boy. His 2-3 stars IDs have either counter or evades, but he will take more damage, making countering risky. His 3 other IDs have a block skill, but only 7 has a higher than average defense level. Faust is a bit more mixed. Her L Corp and N Corp IDs both have lower defense level and evade skill, and 7 does not have tanking capacities outside of her block skill. Zwei Faust does have some tankiness, however she does not benefit from her passives, neither is her defense level very high. W Corp has higher defense level and health, but might have suffered from power creep on her block skill. While we are on Faust, I have to mention Fluid Sac, which while not granting tankiness, does support tanks very well with its healing abilities. Don Quixote is also pretty fragile. All of her IDs beside N Corp have lower defense levels and evade skills with only average values. The only kinda noteworthy one is N Corp, who has a bit of defense, but not even better than base Faust. Her base ego does heal her, so I guess that somewhat helps. Ryoshu is also fragile. We're getting there soon, I promise. She has the same properties as Dawn, with 1 counter on 7, who has low defense and health. Her W Corp ID however can get high evade value, which is relevant, especially for so that no one will cry. Her Kurokumo ID is the tankiest, but don't count on it. Also, Base Ryoshu has the amazing passive of being able to die faster. Both her Chef ID and Red Eyes Open Ego can heal on kills. Meursault, finally, is the opposite. Unless you are playing Liu or Rosespawner, who still have higher tankiness than average, you are playing a tank. His base ID already has more tanking capacity than the previous IDs, including a passive that can offer 1 protection. It's not much, but we take those. W Corps Meursault has the lowest tanking abilities of the other three, with lower health and high but not maxed defense level and block skill. Our Corp 40 defense and 20 block do offers the tankiest non-passive boosted ID. Finally, his N-Corp ID in between does not have a block skill, but benefits from higher health pool and a lot of protection under 50% HP, though on resonance, with also a heal on skill 3. If you have more than one slot, counter spamming can become very fun. Meursault also has access to Chains of Others, one of the best debuffing and tanking ego in the game, and also Pursuance offering support. We will not talk about the other two. Hong Lu follows up with love from the devs, as outside of his base ID, all have higher than average defense level. All of them also have a block skill, excepting Tang, who has been granted the highest possible evade rolls, making it one of the closest things we have to an evade tank. Liu and Kurokumo are not tanks, but the difference in block skill values is intriguing. W Corp Hong Lu does have tank and supportive abilities with his charge barrier, and his skill tree has not been taken into account. Finally, K Corp Hong Lu needs no presentation. While having already good defenses, his healing abilities are off the roof because of Undying passive, not mentioning Impulse. We are not gonna talk about Soda, but Dimension Shredder does have a zombie passive if you need to proc it. Heathcliff is probably the closest thing to a Bruiser, with 3 counters and just above average defenses. His Shi ID might struggle with his stagger threshold though. N-Corp and 7 have a block skill but nothing interesting. But N-Corp does have a passive able to increase con power by 1, so that counts I guess? In any case, R-Corp. Just kidding. Sunshower. While not a proper tank, his passive can grant him 5 protection per turn, making him very tanky. The problem is how he gets it. His counter gives him 5 sinking when used, so after being hit. However, his passives will hit his sinking before being attacked next turn, making it impossible to proc his passive by himself with 1 slot. The only way is his skill 3, however it is only once every 6 turns, and the sinking will disappear pretty quickly with both parts of his passive and being hit, so it needs some kind of revision. AEDD is a helpful ego for self-healing with Sunshower though, if you manage to make it work. Ishmael has 1 tank ID and a half. L2 evade skills have average values, the 2 counters don't protect, and their base ID is average. A mention to LCCB having the abilities of a tank somewhat, if not power creeped. Finally, Sloshing. Okay, so Sloshing has good numbers, especially for a 2 stars. She also has a passive which has the value of a block at level 35 if you lose clashes, effectively making her skills able to be block skills for next turn and continually lose. Funny. You can also bank on that by using her block skill for 1 turn higher defense, which the values here are based on, making her very tanky. Rodion is a mixed bag. Her LCCB ID is the most fragile, and a lot of her other IDs have a counter, with Kurokumo counter giving her 1 protection. Too bad her passive transforms it. Rose Spawner isn't too noteworthy, but Zvi Rodion can actually tank a lot if you manage to stack on poise. Finally, Diechi. Well, her skills passive can allow her to have up to 60% max HP of shield, so about 118 at level 35, not including the block value. For references though, I took 20% max HP or 39 shield, so the equivalent of discarding a skill 2 with Insight 2 or skill 3 with Insight 1. It is still the tankiest thing on the list. She just lacks healing, but not like she needs it too much. Sinclair brings back the more fragile trend, Blade Lineage being slightly tanky still, enough to use counter I guess. The 2 noteworthy though are Zvi Sinclair, with no passive but higher than average defensive values, and Mariachi, with also higher values than evade, by 1 power, so not that much either. Lifetime Stew and more so now Lantern can bring some good support heal. Otis, Base and Molar IDs are fragile, though Molar does have some block. G-Corp is mid, and Blade Lineage can have high evade values if you manage to stack on poise. 7 Otis is close to other tanks, but has slightly lower numbers on health and defense, and no passive. Finally, Gregor only has blocks, and with it, average at best defense values. However, his base, So Chef, and G-Corp IDs all have heals, which is valuable, if not for him, at least for support. His Vi ID, however, has both high defense levels, taken with a 5 defense level up for reference, and added shields, making him a really good tank. The Lantern Ego can also help with HP restoration with this ID. Alright, now that we have reviewed everything, time for some conclusions. First, I'd like to talk about defensive skills, starting with evade. In this game, evade has a lot of potential. by being able to completely neutralize damage and effects and being recyclable. It can be associated with two very special status, aggro, for obvious reasons, and the forgotten defense power-up status for actually increasing the value. The main problem right now though is, like usual, the lack of support, notably a proper evade tank. Imagine for a second, if you will, an ID, with the ability to gain both aggro and defense power-up on top of an high evade value like 16 or 17. Imagine it being able to draw in the 3 so that no one will cry skills and evade them all before failing one of the 15 colors, but at least you could dream! The closest thing right now is Sang Hong Lu. Well, I'm sure this ID will become an ID at some point in time. As for the other two types of skills, counter is not really a defense skill, the main problem being the IDs using it at the moment. It can be great for she IDs to lose some HP for their passives, but you are just gonna get staggered before being able to actually counter. The payoff for a successful counter is also pretty underwhelming. I guess the best we have right now is a skill 3 from Heathcliff Rodion, but it is hard to obtain and usually it is barely ever worth using it. Sun Shower could be very useful, even more so because it is a 4th thing on the ID, but the sinking gain and passive synergy is pretty meh for now. Still one of his best options though. Last but not least, blocks at the moment are really boring. Gain a shield and that's it. That might be why most people don't want to use them that much. Sure, some have added effects, and those are the good ones, like Heathcliff Rong Lu's Ampule on use. The main synergy for both skill and counter is protection, or on a lesser level, defense level up. So your best bet for now, and the best way to make interesting ideas in the future, is to ally those statuses with those skills. That's the case for Incorp Meursault, for example, and Sasha or Heathcliff, if you can make it work. Additional shield gain for future counter users would be pretty neat also. In any case, that's it for the defensive skills overall. There are two other big factors about tanking capacities that I'd want to talk about. One is, types and scene affinities are a pain. You might understand that I'm not too fond of 2 times multiplying type charts. It's lazy rock paper scissors design at best. Yes, I'm looking at those guys. Luckily, Limbus is willing to be more flexible with the individual resistances and decimal multipliers. Even then, it prevents tanks to tank on random occasions, especially because enemies often have 2 types of attacks and 2 or 3 sins. Like sinners, huh? And as you are limited by locking IDs and such, the problem right now is mainly the lack of options. Moreover, it also kills setup strats in the egg. Why bother setting up a 40% decrease for a measly 50% damage increase when you can just rip space an eyeball and pop the frog? They aren't exclusive, but again, you are limited by your options and locking them beforehand. This is even worse since the offense and defense level updates, as the broken potential of actually causing massive damage increase with percent-based defense drop on an additive formula is now gone. So with WCOM Meursault, spending 8 charges now inflicts 8 defense level down, which in best cases can make a 20% damage increase. So the equivalent of True Fragile or 1 gaze. I spent 8 charges to get the equivalent of half a Quake Suppression! Ah! But even then, defense levels actually matter quite a bit. The prime example is Gregor. With his ability to constantly get defense level ups, it does decrease the damage by quite a bit depending on the situation, and its stacking with resistances can really neutralize damage, so for tanking it is really good. But for shredding enemies it is... I miss my Rosie Desire against KQ E1J 33 Strat Hong Lu. I miss it a lot. To conclude, the biggest problems to tanks is the actual content. In Railway, speedrun is the goal, where tanks are barely useful, and in higher cycles, the damage modifiers becomes ridiculous, making it hard to tank overall, but which does encourage evade strats. However, even if you can, abnormalities with attack weights or who want a fast beating like Fae Lantern, or those wanting clashes like Centipede, do not encourage tanking. The main place where they are useful right now is Armorian Dungeon 2, and I do expect it to stay similar even on Season 3. There, evades are hardly possible, but so is clashing, making tanking actually viable. But we will see if it's still the case soon enough. Anyway, even in normal content, a more important thing is preparation, so you are not stuck with only 2 tanks in your team having the same weaknesses and not being able to take that freaking counter. And that concludes this video. Longer than expected. As a final message, Walpurgisnacht is coming, and I'm glad I've stocked on Lunacy, so that I won't have regrets. Wait, no, I won't regret. Anyway, next I would love to do some raidway content, if I manage to. The numbers are growing. except the ones above. I might also try a short video format. In any case, thanks for watching, and keep your sanity high in this slow descent into the inferno.
Hey, you. You're finally awake.